Hello. Hello.
Mario. Hi.
No video. Hello.
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 Oh. Ah, still can't see. Okay.
Yeah, my glasses get fogged without the mask now.
I have fingerprints all over mine. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. Your kids are still here?
Yeah, Rivka's here. Yeah.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, she's leaving Thursday.
Oh. She wants to do their coffees in New Jersey.
Exactly. No, there's no Kofa's no place.
I know.
No place sane is doing it. I don't know about New York, but
In New York, they're gonna close. In New York, they're gonna close the shuls.
yeah.
You know,
Like the one in Palm Springs?
Yeah.
you know, on Tuesday,
Yeah.
we went for a walk with Anna.
Yeah.
We must have come across 100 from people.
Yeah.
Only three masks. Me, Anna, and Avi Reichman. The rest, no.
Where was this? The other side of town?
No, in our side of town. Yeah, not in Hancock Park. No, no.
Sad
It's a
story.
shame. It's a shame.
Well, they want to be like Lawrence, maybe. Or Borough Park. Which one? You take your pick.
No, they all think they're Trump. Did you watch when he was in the White House yesterday, Harold?
No, I didn't see it.
I think he had trouble breathing. Really.
Oh.
He was
I didn't see it.
el macho.
Oh.
Good evening, everybody. We're still involved in Yain Nesach and Stan Yenam. We're dealing with the issue of can Yain Mavushal be forbidden. We learned last week that when you heat up the yain owned by Gentiles, certainly to 100 degrees centigrade, but even according to Rav Moshe and Rav Ovadia to 70 degrees pasteurization, it's considered yain mavushal. We said that Rav Shlomo Zalman does not approve of that it's yain mavushal if you just pasteurize it. But we said then that wine is permitted. So, and so we said mavushal wine is permitted. Some poskim permit pasteurized wine and grape juice as well, even when touched by a Gentile. Nevertheless, it's important to mention that it is still forbidden to drink wine, even if it's yain mavushal, when attending a party with non-Jews. This is based on a statement in the Gemara Avodah Zarah. Tanya Rabbi Shmuel on Yisrael shebechutz la'aretz ovdik echavim b'taharahe. A Jew who are outside of Eretz Yisrael are considered as if they're worshiping Avodah Zarah. Ketzah. Ovdik echavim she'asa mishta livno. A Gentile makes a party for his son. The Zimen kol hayudim should be iro, and they invite all the Jews in that city. Even though they're eating kosher food, they bring their own food, they bring their own drink. They have their own waiter. It's considered as if they're eating from takruvas avodah zarah. Based on this, the Gemara rules that one may not drink wine touched by Gentiles, even if it's mevushal, if it's at a party or a celebration together with them. Yesham dvar machem osru osan chachamim, says the Rambam. Aval pishen lisroni kumin haTorah. It's all rabbinic. Gozra lev kidei lisrachik min hagoyim, as a method to stay away from Gentiles. Actually, sarvu ben Yisrael. You have holiday customs to avoid intermarriage. The Elohim also lishtos imayim. We're not allowed to drink with them. Even though it's, for example, yain mevushal, it's not yain nesach. Okay, it's not lo yishta b'mesibat shel goyim. Aval pishu yain mevushal sheinu nesar. O shayashos mikelim luvado. He's drinking from his own kelim. So this is not such a well-known halacha, and this is in fact codified by the Shulchan Aruch, who rules that it's also forbidden to eat at such a celebration, even if one brings his own kosher food. Ovid kochavim ha'osem mishta lechupas b'no. You're invited to a wedding of a non-Jew who's making it for his son or daughter. Also, Yisrael echol sham. Afil ochel mishalo b'shamish lo omin alav u'mishamish. Based on this, one should be aware that if one needs to attend some sort of celebration hosted by non-Jews, such as a party or wedding, one would not be allowed to eat or drink there. So let's see the footnotes. Contemporary poskim dispute whether there's any halachic issue with attending an office party if the office is owned by non-Jews in light of this halacha. According to Rav Menashe Klein, one should not attend. While according to many other poskim, it's permitted, at least in certain situations. The ones who permit is Rav David Bleich, Herschel Schechter, Daniel Nuston. And then, although the Shulchan Aruch refers specifically to an Ovid Kochavim, an idol worshiper, it would seem from the Rambam that all Gentiles are included, and even the Shulchan Aruch would agree. And the use of the term idol worshiper was not meant to exclude other Gentiles. It is also worth mentioning that in all of these cases, one should consult with a rabbinic authority concerning whether one should even attend in the first place, as there are other multiple factors that must be considered. Another somewhat similar halacha is mentioned in Your Day 114 concerning not drinking beer produced by Gentiles, even if it's kosher, in a non-Jewish owned bar or restaurant. Rather, one would have to take the beer home to drink. The Ramah, though, holds that the custom is to be lenient concerning beer made out of grain. So nowadays, according to the Ramah, drinking beer may not be forbidden for Ashkenazim. What about the poskim discuss whether drinking coffee would be problematic? Although many are lenient, nevertheless, the Chochmas Adam decries those who drink in non-Jewish coffee houses for other reasons that relate to the environment. This question is relevant to drinking coffee nowadays in shops such as Starbucks, though the common custom is to be lenient. Rav Herschel Schechter rules that one may be lenient, even if you accept the Chochmas Adam, if it is uncommon to socialize with strangers in coffee shops. Okay, so that's just interesting aside halachas that flow from this. 286. How does Stam Yena become prohibited? Let us return now to the halachas of Stam Yena and focus how to define the touching of a Gentile that would forbid the wine. What does the Gentile have to do to the wine to make it Stam Yena? Chazal established that three conditions must be met for the wine to be forbidden, and it's brought by the Shulchan Aruch. Maga goy leser banotzach shlosha tnoim. In order for the touch of a Gentile to prohibit the wine as stam yenam, it requires three criteria. Echad, she is kavein liga. He can't just brush up against it without kavana, without knowing that it's wine. For example, lafuke tinok shenagad lav bar kavanu. Let's say an infant touches the wine, he's not a bar kavana. V'chei lafuki nafal labor valameis. let's say a Gentile falls into a vat of wine and dies there, or is dead, he comes up, he's dead. So he touched it without das. Sheni, shuyada shuyai, he has to know that it's wine. Ushlishi, shaloye oisik b'davracher. He can't be involved in something else. He has to be focused on what he's doing. The Rambam clarifies further what type of contact of the Gentile with the wine will prohibit it. He has to touch the wine itself, not the bottle, the wine. Whether with his hand or another limb. They used to stick their finger or hand in and sort of shake it. And that's how they would designate the wine for their avodah zarah. The Tur writes that it's not only when the Gentile touches the wine directly that it becomes forbidden, but even if he touches it via vessel and shakes it. Right? It says the Tur loishna naga biyado, o b'davar achash biyado, asr bana. Afilu b'shichshich ba'amash shichshich bo, v'lo yatzak mimenu klum. Even if he just shakes the bottle without touching it, and he doesn't pour from it, afilu b'fiv kigon shesas mimenu. Let's say he drinks from it, or shemotzotz b'meinekes, or he uses a straw to suck it up. That's all considered he touched it. The Shulchan Aruch codified these points. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Ketzad yanagia, she'osr bo agoy hayayin bana, she'iga biyado baraglo, if he touches the wine with his hand or foot, the Ramah says it's not if you touch it with your foot. The ein derech nisuch bekav. Shulchan Aruch says obedover achash biyado v'shachshach afilu b'fiv. Let's say he holds something in his hand and he shakes it, or with his mouth. So that would make it stam yeda. The Gemara Avodah Zarah states that if the Gentile pours the wine, then it's forbidden, even if he did not shake it. So pouring is an act that would make it stam yena. Amrav Papa, Ovid Kechavim Adna v'Yisrael Akuva. If the Gentile is pouring wine into a cup that the Yisrael is holding, Chamra Asir, then the wine is prohibited. My time. It flowed through the force of the non-Jew. The Rambam accepts this statement of the Gemara. Not a klishal yayin. You picked up a vessel that holds wine, he pours it. Even though you didn't shake it, Nesa. If he lifts it only, and doesn't shake it, and doesn't touch it, doesn't pour it, the Rambam says is permitted. Another possible manner where the Gentile can render the wine forbidden is if the vessel containing the wine is open, and the Gentile moves it even without picking it up. It's accepted by the Shulchan Aruch, though the Ramah is lenient. If the Gentile touched or is holding an open vessel of wine and shakes it, even though he didn't lift it, even though he didn't touch the wine directly, it's still prohibited. Says the Ramah, but the Rabbim Cholkin Lomar, there are many that argue that the that if you shake it, because without lifting it, lo mikri shichshach. So you don't have to be machmir if it's going to lead to financial loss. Not a goy klishal yayin, v'bio v'yotzakayin. If the Gentile lifted it and poured it, aval bishlo shichshach, he didn't shake it nesar. Sharei, this is the Shulchan Aruch. Sharei ba'yayin mikocho. He'd be of lo shichshach lo naga mutter. But if he lifted the bottle and didn't shake it and didn't touch the wine directly, mutter. Says the Ramah, just touching the bottle, you don't lift it, you don't shake it, then you don't forbid it just by touching the.
Bernie, can I interrupt you a second?
Of
Does
course.
that mean anybody, even kosher wine that's open, if a non-Jew or Gentile lifts the bottle and pours it for, let's say, the guests at a table?
Absolutely, absolutely, that prohibits it,
What
absolutely.
happens at all of these dinners that we go to where they're waiters pouring wine into your glass?
Bernie, it's a yain mevushal, which we said does,
Has
once
to-
it becomes mevushal, the touch of the Gentile does not make it
This
stand.
is obviously non-mavushal wine. Even if the Gentile, even if the wine was boiled beforehand, if it's a non-Jewish, a non-kosher wine, sorry, I'm sorry. I'm just saying.
If
That's why
if you're going to a wedding,
non-mavushal is never served at a banquet, correct?
correct. If you're going to a function that has hashgacha, and there are non-Jewish waiters serving wine, the only wine that they're using is mevushal wine.
Understood.
Yes,
What was that?
100%.
So if the housekeeper moves the bottle from here
No.
to here, and it was.
Well,
a
that shakes
Mavushal-
it, but it's shaking.
No. Just from, if you move it 2 feet from one side of the table
We,
to the other.
he said,
it's not
says,
shaking,
so by
doesn't-
touching it alone, that doesn't do it. But if he picks it up and pours it,
Not, how about just picking it up
Right.
and putting it?
if he picked it up but did not shake or touch it, it's permitted. That's according to Shulchan Aruch.
If
So
you
they
have a
moved from
housekeeper
counter
in
to
the
a
house
table
and
by
there's
mistake.
a non-mavushal bottle, you may not allow that housekeeper to touch the wine.
Absolutely not,
We always
To
have to
move
hide
it,
it in the
even if it's
bedroom.
closed, right?
even if it's closed.
Okay.
Because if she shakes it, it's going to be a problem. And certainly if she pours it, it's going to be a problem. But we learned tonight, though, if she picks it up but somehow doesn't shake it or touch it, doesn't touch the wine itself, it's permitted. But again, it's always going to be a question. If she say carried a bottle
Sure.
from one room to another, it's going to be shaken.
That's why your children always take you to their bedrooms.
Okay. Okay. So yes, you got to be careful. If you have yayin she'eno mevushal, you got to be careful to make sure that you open it and you pour it and you handle it and you try to finish it as opposed to putting it back in the refrigerator because
Put it back in the refrigerator yourself, and then the housekeeper moves it around to make room for other bottles.
exactly
No problem.
That's exactly the case. So although the rules as presented here are somewhat detailed, it is clear that a Gentile simply touching a bottle of wine without moving it does not prohibit it. It also seems that if the Gentile only opens the bottle, but does not raise it, shake it, or pour it, the wine is also not prohibited. So we have certain guidelines. If somehow they can open it without doing those things, and it's not prohibited. And the Sefer HaKashrus gives us a good summary. Number one, Maga Goy HaOiser. What is the Gentile touch that prohibits Hainu Negia B'yayin Atzmo B'yad? If he touched the wine itself with his hand, O Bezras Kli, let's say he uses a fork and he touches the wine with a fork, or he drinks from it, Shtiya Minayay. O Hagbas Kli Patuach V'nanu, you lifted an open bottle and shook it. Those are all going to things that prohibit. Aval Negia B'Kli B'lo Nanua, Kla. Just by touching the bottle without moving it is permitted. Livnei Ashkenaz Eno Seres Klau. V'nira Shu Adin Livnei Sfarad. He thinks it's the same din for the Sfardi. Ein Negias Goy B'Yayin O Seres Bano. And the wine doesn't become Osir Bano. Ela K'Shaysan Negia B'Kavona. He has to be touching it on purpose. And ubitnai sheyada shuyad, and he knows that it was wine. Goy shigbia b'bakbuk. If he lifts, the goy lifts the bottle. O kankan yayin biatzak and pours it. Ava bishlo shichshich, even though he didn't shake it, nesar yan bishtia. So again, the wine cannot be drunk. You cannot drink it. What that which was poured and that which remains in the bottle. But just by touching the bottle, that does not prohibit. Then he says, if the wine is in open bottles V'zizam goy mitzad litzad. The non-Jew moves it from, let's say, one place to another miglil without lifting it. Umeglilin goy biyayin, so without touching the wine. Hayayin oser ba'ano. That's according to the Sfardi. For Ashkenazim, you would not be machmir if you were going to lose money. Then he says, Goyshem mozag yain l'toch kosas hamesubim. A Gentile pours wine. Afilu yodu nesuna b'kfafa. Even if he's wearing gloves, hayayin nesar. Of course, the wine is prohibited. Mozag l'toch kli shebidei Yisrael. If the cup was being held by a Jew and he pours the wine, imlo nadnei hagoy takli shebiyado. If there was no shaking, hayayin hayotze osir, the wine that comes out is prohibited. But vanisha b'kli mutter. Achen Yisrael shemozeg l'kli shebidei hagoy. A Jew pours wine into the hands, into a cup that's being held by a goy. Imlo nadnei hagoy sakli. If the non-Jew did not move the kli, ayan mutter b'shastiyah. So the wine is permitted to drink. It goes, so that follows all the principles that we've learned. The Yalkut Yosef writes that in a case where the wine is poured by the Gentile, only the wine that was poured is prohibited, but not the rest of the wine in the bottle. So he's more makel. Furthermore, lifting the wine without shaking it does not prohibit it. Right? In Yatzak ben Abakbuk shel hayayin al toch kos, if a Gentile pours wine into a cup, masha b'toch kos nesar, the wine in the cup is prohibited, but masha daim b'toch habakbuk mutter. The wine remaining in the bottle is okay. He says if he just lifts without shaking the open wine bottle, it does not prohibit. Now the Darkei Tshuva notes that Anshe Maisa, men of pious conduct, is stringent not to drink wine even if a Gentile looked at it. I am to say for Tamei mitzvos, Lotase shin mem shekatav zulu shono uvimei chorfi ra'iti anshe ma'isa. When I was young, I saw Hasidim shayu machmir alatzma. They were very stringent. Shafilu b'rias kli hayayin lo hayu shosim. Even if the non-Jew just gazed at it, avu bishlo noga ad kanva. The Ben Ish Chai cites the same custom as Darkei Tshuva, but adds that if an Ishmaelite, a Muslim, sees the wine, there's no reason for this stringency. Kotav Midrash Tel Pio B'Shem Rabbeinu Menachem Abakli, the Magoy Ratayan Afal Pishlo Naga Bo Yishlach Mishlo Lishtos. Then Kasu B'Shem Ashnei Luchos Bris Shlo. Aval Medina Mutar B'Vadai. Meikra Din, it's okay. The Magoy Hazayin Avoid Kochav Mazalos. If he doesn't worship Avodah Zarah like the Muslims. Elohu Midas Yishmol Afilu Chumra. It's not even acceptable chumrah.
So Ernie, two questions. One is, question number one is, did you cover yichud with stam yenam?
No.
So the question is, if there's a question, I don't know why I would not cover it because it's an important topic of a shmira, similar to shmira. But if for example, a housekeeper and you left, we talked about some Shabbos, and you left a bottle of non-bushel wine in the house on the counter, and just the cork was in it. There's a problem with that.
Right.
That's not an issue of someone looking at it. It's an issue of having yichud with it.
Okay.
Anyway,
they didn't. They didn't cover just having yichud with it.
Cover at all. That's a very big problem. Is the shmira, and the second question we have related to Midas Yishmael is, do you have to have somebody who is like
well, but by the way, Chaim, what they said about Yishmael is the Indian of looking at it, not touching it. And Yishmael would also, through his touch, he's a Gentile regarding that. But here we're talking about the special chumrah of a Gentile looking at it.
Oh, okay. So you have an issue. So clearly, if touching is a problem and looking might be a problem, if you leave the house and leave the housekeeper with your Yom Bushel that's been already partially opened, not double sealed, but one that's already been just a cork in it, right? There's a problem with that yain.
It's certainly a suffix. I mean, yeah, it's certainly a suffix, but it's certainly a suffix, right?
So I learned in that situation that wine is no longer mutar.
I think based on what we've learned today, that would certainly be reasonable, because you have to assume that they did move it, and that's it. But just by moving it, they shake it. It's a problem. So, but they didn't cover just yichud with the wine yet. I don't think
At all.
That's something that, but we'll see. Let's continue. Now we're going to get into something a lot more relevant. I mean, something very relevant, which is if someone is a Jew who's machal Shabbos, the Farhesia, do they create stam yenam as a non-Jew? Now we've already learned in Bishul Akum that one who desecrates Shabbos publicly, and one is a mumar lahachis, it means he's violating law because he wants to make Hashem angry, not because, for example, he has a te'ovon, he has a desire for it, but he's doing it lahachis. They are considered like Gentiles regarding Bishul Akum. So, and this law is codified when the Shulchan Aruch discusses shchita. Mishumid lahachis, someone who is going against Judaism. He's he's tried to convert to Christianity. Afilu davar echad. Or he violates even one law of the Torah because out of anger against Hashem. Oh, shu mishumad elilim. He worships Avodah Zarah. Oh, l'chal Shabbos befarhesia. Or he violates Shabbos publicly, which we'll see means in front of 10 people. Oh, shu mishumad l'chal Torah. Let's say a person, he keeps Shabbos and he doesn't violate Avodah Zarah, but he rejects all other mitzvahs of the Torah. Dino kegoy. In these laws, his law is like a goy. And therefore, all of these laws of stam yenam would apply to him as well. Says the Ramah, Mishena choshesh b'shchita, v'ochel nevelos below te'avon. He eats food even if it's not shechted, and he eats carcasses even without desire, just for anger to Hashem. Aval b'sheino oselachis means no. If he eats nevelos below te'avon, he just eats it without desire, even though he's not doing it lachis. Dino kemumar lachis. His din is like a violator lachis, and therefore he would be treated like a goy.
So that would cover all atheists, all Jews who decide not to have any religion.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's. I think this will be a very eye-opening chapter. The Shulchan Aruch reiterates the same principle in Even HaEzer. Yisrael sheishtame, a Yisrael that attempted to convert to a different religion. Oh, shu mechal Shabbos is befarhesia. He's mechal Shabbos. Hareu kegoy l'chol dvarim. He's like a non-Jew. The Rashba adds that even someone who does not believe in the words of the Chachamim is considered a mumar lahachis, an apostate out of anger. The Rashba also specifies explicitly that this classification of such people as Gentile applies with regard to Yayin Nesach and Stam Yena. Aval Mishumid L'chalo Shabbos B'farhesia. If somebody is publicly desecrating the Shabbos. Oshe'eno Mami B'divrei Rabbeinu. He rejects rabbinic law. Hu min. He is a min. Now, we're going to see. Min is an acronym for Maimin Yeshu Notzri. So in many of the places in Shas where it described the early Christians, they were described as minim. Now, when they wrote Talmud Bavli during the Middle Ages, it was under severe censorship. So and in many places where it said min, they removed the word min and they would write stuki, or they would write kusi, because they didn't want to anger the censor. So when we say umalshinim alti tikva v'chol aminim, right? That birchas aminim was made in Yavne in the year 100 CE, primarily against the Christian heretics, the Jews who were trying to convert to Christianity, which is basically a rejection of rabbinic law and rejection of avodah zarah. So the Rashba calls them a min. By the way, they also say here that the word mishumad was also many times they changed it to say mumar instead of the word, because they knew the Christians learned that the word mishumad meant somebody who's converting to Christianity. So that rather that they would just say mumar. Anyways, the Rashba says that a person who rejects rabbinic law, yeno yain nesach, whose far as sifrei kusmin, his books have to be burned. V'yeshomim afbon of mamzerim, and that if he has children, the children are mamzerim. The inyan chilul Shabbos or misha aval divrei b'seilah daito. Someone who desecrates Shabbos, or he follows his own opinion, not the chachamim, o she'ovid avodah zarah shu mulzik bo shlosha pamim. We see that he acts this way 3 times. So then he creates yain nesach. Aval b'pam achas u'shtayim eino osa yain nesach. And Rashba says he has to commit these acts in front of 10 people publicly. The Sefer HaKashrus codifies the halacha concerning yain nesach that, strictly speaking, a mumar, or one who publicly desecrates Shabbos, should render wine forbidden when coming in contact with it, like a Gentile. Right? Says the Sefer HaKashrus, mumar avodah zarah chal Shabbos for hesya, mumar lachis afilu davar echad, even against one law in the Torah, dinam kigoyim. Therefore, when he touches one, all the various laws that we've just discussed, how the non-Jew touches the wine, if a Jew who is a non-religious Jew does the same thing, he creates yain nesach as well. However, there's a well-known concept called tinuk shenishba, a baby that was kidnapped as an infant and grew up among Gentiles, who is not familiar with the practices of Judaism. Such an individual is considered an apostate. Such an individual is not considered an apostate, even if he does not observe the Torah. The Rambam expands this concept, which is based on the Gemara, to also include a case of a child of heretics. So somebody who left Yiddishkeit has children, so you can't blame the children. Someone doesn't follow Torah Shabbat Peh. He's Eino Zakin Mamre on Torah. So there is a sugya in Shas called Zakin Mamre. If the Sanhedrin paskin a certain psak, and one of the Talmidei Chachamim goes against it, he's called the Zakin Mamre. He can be put to death. However, the Rambam characterizes this. Someone who just rejects the Torah Shabbat, he's not a Zakin Mamre. Ela reza b'klal aminim. He's a min. And you can see, like the footnote says, like the term mishuma, the term min, as used in the Rambam, was often changed to apikoris or tstuki due to fear of the censor. In fact, there are a number of times in the Gemara that the term min is used as referring to Christians specifically, and was changed to stuki or kusi. Anyways, meaning, person has his own opinions, and he rejects Torah Shabbat Peh. He follows his own thoughts. But that person's children, and they continue not to, follow Judaism. Shidichosam avotam, right? His parents raised him in a wrong way, v'noldu b'minus, and they grew up in a heretical home. The Rambam clearly states that these are like infants stolen by pirates, taken off to an island somewhere who never knew anything about Yiddishkeit. And then they were raised by non-Jews in their religion. And Shehu Anu, such a person is, it was done against his will. Now he finds out he's Jewish. And now he sees Judaism, he sees their religion. He's still Areu Kaonus. Shari Gidlu al Tautam. It was all done by mistake. So therefore, the poskim debate whether non-observant individuals nowadays have the status of a tinuk shenishba, which would mean that there is no problem with them handling wine or of a mumer lahakas, an apostate out of anger, in which case it would be prohibited to drink wine handled by them. On one hand, they have grown up as secular Jews and were never raised with an observant lifestyle. But on the other hand, today, there are also many ways to learn more about Judaism. So many poskim conclude that one may be lenient and define them as a tinuk shenishba for various reasons. There are two very famous tshuvas regarding this. One is the Yehuda Yaleh, Rav Yehuda Assad. He says, "Uve tshuvas harashba, mashma, the leka chiluch bein onsim l'sharmunim l'chal shabbosos." He says there is no. The Rashba said there was no difference between somebody who was forced to do something or didn't know better to someone who was doing it because he knew what he was doing. That's the Rashba. Amnam dafka b'chal Shabbos v'hesya be'inan v'hainu b'fnei asar miYisrael. He says you still need a public desecration of Shabbos in front of 10 people. And also came pamayim. He has to do it multiple times. Oh, that it has to be very famous. And he knows it will become famous. Then he says, in fact, if you're going to invalidate him as an aid or for an oath, people would have to give testimony in Besdin in front of him describing his actions. And says the Yehuda Yalach, Hanami Lesra Yain b'Mago. You can't just say, oh, this person is non-observant. If he touches wine, it's going to become Yain Nesach. No, he has to go through a formal process in Besdin, testimony made against him as to what he did. Hanami lives so gufo mamish. Lasosik goy gomer pshita. He says to make a person a Jew like a goy, it doesn't work. There has to be testimony given that he violated Shabbos in front of 10 people. But if they only relied on the hearsay, people hear about it. And 2 Eidim have not come. That'll work. And not only that, you might see them do other mitzvahs. And they stay away from other averos. Says the Yudah Yala that we don't treat them like a goy. Shador parutz merubat, in our generation, where there's a lot of chilul, Shabbos. He says, we also should not distance them and push them away with 2 hands. Otherwise, they'll get worse. You should bring them closer. He says even someone who's very careful about halacha, he should not be machmir, not to drink wine touched by Mechalei Shabbos. There was no testimony given to them about this. So according to Rav Assad, most non-observant cannot technically qualify as desecrating Shabbos in public, since in order to be conferred with such a classification, they would need to have been testified against in front of a Beis Din, which is not usually the case. In addition, treating them as not being Jewish would distance them more from Yiddishkeit, which he acknowledges is not wise in more modern times. Next comes a more famous tshuva, the Binyan Sion Rav Yaakov Ettlinger. Rav Yaakov Ettlinger lived in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s in Germany. And it, in a way, was like one of the Rebbeim of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. And so Rav Yaakov Ettlinger certainly understood what was going on in Germany regarding the assimilation that was going on. So this Binyan Sion is an important tshuva. Hinei adkon dibarnu mikra din ech lodun mechal Shabbos b'far hesya. He says, up until now we've been discussing the din of mechal Shabbos b'far hesya. He says, aval lefoshe Yisrael shebizmanenu. He says, regarding Jews in our time who are sinners, lo yadana ma'odun b'hem. He says, I'm not sure how to judge them. This problem is like the majority of people. Violating Shabbos for them is considered like as it's permitted. So there is a category in Hilchos Shabbos where somebody thinks that it's permitted. Sharak Korov Lemezu. He's not considered a mezi. He's called a Korov Lemezu. And Yesh B'hem Shemispalim Tfilah Shabbos U'Mekachim Kiddush Hayom. We know in the last 100 years in America, people would go to shul. There was a shul in Chicago called Shomrei Shabbos, where people would go to shul and then go to their stores. And they made sure their kids went to shul and say, you stay in shul, I have to go. But they went and davened and made kiddush.
If Walter was on this video, he would tell you about the South African Litvaks. They all came to shul and then they drove off to work.
That happened in Chicago in the 1930s and 40s. Maybe later. See, by violating Shabbos, you're sort of rejecting the Creator. However, on the other hand, he's making Kiddush, which says Zecher L'maisa Bereishis. So he's living a double life. What about their children that grew up and they don't know anything about the laws at all? The Tzdukim, in the time of Chazal, they did not keep Torah Shabbat Peh, but they weren't considered Mumrim. They were just carrying out the patterns of life of their forefathers. Says the Binyan Si, and this is the first time that this terminology was used in this context. Ve'heim ketinik shenishba leben goyim. V'chein kosev gamarav Moshe ben Yosef Matriani namabit. Efsher nami did stukim shlo hurgelu b'toch Yisrael. Did stukim, who didn't know really the ways of regular Jews, v'lo yoda likros adas, ve'ena me'izim pneim neged chachmei ador, lo chashvei mezidi. They were not considered mezi. Yu'uyin sham. V'harbe me'porshe ador domim lahem. V'adifim mehem. The Binyan Sion is talking about the Jews he knew in Germany, that these sinners are better than the Tzdukim. Shema Shemach Me'arav Rav Shimon B'Karoim and Rav Shimon by the Karaites. They were considered Lavshiv Yenim Yain Nesach. It wasn't the fact that they violated the Yom Tovim. They rejected the principles of a religion. Shemal and V'loy Poirin, they did circumcision without Priya. Ve'lam Dina Gitim V'Kiddushin, they didn't do Git and Kiddushin. Shayidei zeh bnei mamzerim. Was there Rava Poshim Shizbaneinu Lo Partsu? The Binyan Sian says, our Jews still go to the rabbi to get married. They still call him Moel. And how many times do we see that here in America, the concerned reform, that they still get married with chuppah v'kiddushin? When their children are born, they call them Moel to do Mila. Says the Binyan Sian, so he says, if someone wants to be machmir on this kind of wine, tavel of bracha, he says those who are lenient that will drink wine that has been touched by these kind of people, they certainly have something to rely on. Meaning, if we know that they know the laws of Shabbos, and even so, they publicly desecrate Shabbos in front of 10 Jews. So it seems that Rav Etliker's primary argument, though he mentions other factors, is that those who grew up in a non-religious home and are not educated to fulfill the mitzvahs of the Torah are considered like a tinnik shenishba and would not render wine forbidden. Many more recent achronim cite these truvas of the Binyan Si and Yehuda Yala. And Rav Menashe Klein writes that in his opinion, the majority of poskim are lenient about this question concerning the non-observant Jews of our times as well. He says it is not clear that all the considerations concerning non-observant Jews mentioned by the Binyan Si and Yehuda Yala are applicable to all non-religious Jews today, as they also mention the fact that many of these Jews in their times did recite Kiddush or observe other aspects of Judaism, which many today do not. Nevertheless, it would seem that their primary argument that those who were not raised religious are considered like a tinnik shenishba is definitely applicable today as well. Says the Mishnah, Lochos Sinei B'Tshuva Achas Katafti Derova Poskim Sfirlu the B'Chalei Shabbos Kodesh B'Zmanenu Dom the Tinokos Shenishbu. According to Rav Yitzchak Yosef, the Yalkut Yosef, one may only be lenient for a person who desecrates Shabbos but also recites Kiddush and attends shul regularly, a leniency which would not apply to those who are entirely non-observant. Of course, Yalkut Yosef is the son of Rav Ovadia. We know many, this in the Sephardic community, that is something that they would see, people making Kiddush and davening, but they might be Mechal Shabbos. So he says those people certainly would not classify as a non-Jew. Yisrael Mumash Mechal Shabbos B'Varesim Melachos D'Oraisa Kagon Shenoi B'Mechona B'Shabbos. He drives. O Shemashen Cigar. He smokes cigarettes. P'Shus Aram B'Shabbos V'Sharkol Amlachos. Im Nogea Bayan Arei Oser Sayan B'Mago. He will make it Yain Nesach. However, Omnam Yesh Omrim Shem U'Mispalel B'Shabbos. If he davens on Shabbos, U'Mekadosh Layayin B'Shabbos and makes Kiddush, V'Omer Zech L'Maseh Gracious. His touch will not prohibit wine. Those that are makel have something to rely on with property, especially if it happened. However, Rav Moshe Sternbuch is more machmir and holds that one must treat non-observant Jews as Gentiles with regard to stam yenam, even if they were never raised observant or educated about Judaism. His reason is that the purpose of the prohibition is to distance ourselves from close relationships, as developed through wine, with those who may influence us negatively, and the same applies to those who are not interested in Judaism. If they treat him like a goy, so he understands how bad this is. He's got a bad environment, he never was educated. People say that maybe we shouldn't treat him that way. Aval, in Tamadin, if the reason was not a knas, but if the time of this whole din was Nesar Pitav Yena Kadesh Nisrachik Mimenu, we wanted Jews to stay away from non-Jews. So even in these people, even though it might not be their fault that they're not religious, we should stay away from them. You're going to be friendly with them, and they're going to make you less religious. We should be magzir. We should make a decree on them more. People will learn from them. He says, it's very difficult to be lenient regarding if they touch wine. That means they're like an onus. He thinks the general halacha is to be machmir. So according to our approach, it is difficult to be lenient. This is what Sternbuch said regarding the wine of those who desecrate Shabbos publicly in our time, based on the fact that they're not at fault. Since on the contrary, we should be more stringent regarding them. This seems to be the accepted practice to prohibit wine touched by one who desecrates Shabbos publicly. Rav Eliezer Melamed in the Pnei Halacha observes that the majority of poskim in contemporary times are lenient when necessary. Lefichach Rabbi Ma poskim achronim mekilu b'shas hatzorah. V'horu sharat mimashim chal Shabbos be'afgantiyut k'dei lachis. Only somebody who's rejecting, who's b'chal Shabbos because he's rebelling against God. K'dei lachis. Lachis k'neged ha'masoros nechshav k'goy. Only such a person is treated like a goy. Aval misha mechabed is Shabbos b'kiddush v'dakas neos. Somebody who might respect Shabbos, he will say kiddush. He lights the candles, even if he'll violate Shabbos otherwise. Eno nechshav k'goy. V'od she'im hu Yehudi shelo zach l'chinuch torani. If he happens to be a Jew who never merited to have a Jewish education, harehu ka'anus. He's as if it was an accident. Well, he doesn't understand the severity of Chilul Shabbos. V'af im gadal bebeit dati, even if he grew up in a religious house. Pamim shashpa chilonit chazkal. He went to college. The secular influence became very strong. Ad shukaro v'chashem kishogeg. V'onus shena yachol lamod v'fnei ruchos hazman. He might be considered a shogeg and an onus because he couldn't withstand the spirit of the times. Ve'en lachshiv k'goy. And he quotes the Binyan scene. The Od Shachmar B'Chakos Elu, and if we are going to be stringent by keeping him away, Alula Legrom L'Albonot, he's going to be embarrassed. Umachlakot u'mishpachot u'bekilot is going to lead to fights in families and in communities. V'av sheyesh b'achir gabi zman hazeh, right? He's referring to Rav Sternbuch mitoch. Because they want to decrease the influence of the Machal Shabbos on people who are religious. But it seems to be accepted by the majority of the poskim to prevent embarrassment or unity. As long as they don't do it la'achis, we shouldn't be machmir. And therefore, he can be counted for a minion. Rav Melamed refers to a number of additional sources about this issue.
In what way a Machal Shabbos can be counted towards a minion?
He said that's again a great debate. A great debate. He says he just threw it in.
In times of
if he desires, he can be counted. Hang on. He writes that in his opinion, anyone who, while attending a Jewish religious event or ceremony, such as a Shabbat meal, a wedding performed according to halacha brit, observes the rules of halacha properly, respects the occasion, he would not render the wine forbidden during that time. But yes, Bernie, there are shitot that say a Machal Shabbos perhaps it cannot be counted in a minyan.
Okay. From Rav Sternbuch's opinion, it would look like it's totally diametrically opposed to Chabad's approach to dealing with.
Yeah, but you know by the way, Bernie, Chabad many times make sure that they have 10 religious Jews there. They bring Chabad students and yeshiva students. They're not. they're not necessarily counting, and many of the people that come are Baal Tshuvas and are not Machal Shabbos.
I'm referring to the wine, the Rav Sternbuch's prohibition of handling the wine if a Machal Shabbos, a Jew who's even if he has no prior education, he takes a very strong point of view.
Right. And again, I don't know. I bet you Chabad are very machmir regarding that issue. First of all, I've been to Chabad. First of all, they don't let anybody daven to be the chazan. They're very makpid. They have only the rabbi or the one of their yeshiva. And many of the people who daven in these Chabad in Palm Springs, they're already Bali Tshuva, and they would not potentially be lenient if a Machal Shabbos before Hesed touched their wine. The Chabad are very machmir regarding Isser V'Heter. Okay. By the way, this will come up. We're going to learn the laws of minyan. We're going to learn Orach Chaim, and this will come back. We've already seen these laws of Machal Shabbos when we discussed Bishul Akum. I don't think we went into it as deep as we did in this sugya here, but it'll come back too over there by minyan and about a chazan. Can he be a chazan? Can he get an aliyah? Can he duchen? All of these questions will come up when we learn all these sugyas and what the normative halacha is. There's always going to be machmir and there going to be mekilim. Mm-hmm. It seems that even those poskim who are more stringent may still be lenient for individuals who are not yet observant, but have expressed interest in Judaism and are beginning to study Torah and to observe the mitzvahs, as they are already seeking to strengthen their religious commitment. And that's brought by the Sefer HaKashrus. Mechal Shabbos Parvesya, Hamiskarvim, Lechaye Torah mitzvahs, they're getting close. V'oskim b'limud hayadus Hashem Shemayim Chavana Kanav Amitut. Shuvei Magon b'Yanesu Chas v'Sholem with their touch of wine, Aser. Because the Orchin Shadai Meinam Shomer Kolam. Let's say you have guests, and they're not fully practicing, but Achozrim u'Mesarchim. They want to learn more. They're coming. The same thing. Their touch would not disqualify the wine. Sefer HaKashrus also mentions another leniency in a case where wine that was served previously by non-observant individuals or waiters, if dealing with a hall or event, may have been mixed with the wine being served now. In this case, it's permitted to drink the wine. I guess there are simchas that mix wine from previous events, and maybe you have to worry that some of the raiders previously were not observant. You can permit it. You don't have to worry about the mixtures of that kind of wine. By the way, on page 301, which goes into further iyun regarding how it relates to non-religious Jews, you can go into more depth. It'll show you the Rishonim, the Ran, the Ritva, the Rashi, and it'll bring the Rashba, Rav Yaakov Ettlinger. It'll talk about the Chazon Ish. So you can look more into this subject matter at your leisure. Next week we will do Eid Echad Ne'eman B'Isurim, the concept of can you rely on one person, and it's basically hashgacha. How does hashgacha work? Can you eat at people's homes? That kind of thing. And I think that also might be a 2 week. We might do it in 1 week. We might do 2 weeks.